Hello there, this is Yash Kumar Verma, and in this particular video we'll be seeing that how we're using automated testing mechanisms to ensure that first the project builds and it is in the perfect state when we are developing it, and the second is that we are using automated practices to ensure that the roles that we have assigned to different types of users behave the way they're expected to be. So there are two types of tests that we have written. The first are the unit tests and the second are the end-to-end tests. Following the general convention, the E2E would stand for the end-to-end tests, and first of all I'll show you the unit tests that are there. So the unit test would be there for the files in the respective directory with an extension of .spec.ts. Alright, so I'll open the users module, and here you will see the file like controllers.spec.ts and service.spec.ts. Now these are .spec.ts basically are the test files that we have written. Now, like fixing all the linting rules is something that needs to be done. Now I'll be doing that sometime soon. Okay, so what we are doing is this function is run before each and every test, and here we are trying to mock the behavior of the service so that even if the service fails, and basically in unit testing what we do is we try to test the individual components how they behave and not how the entire system works. To test how the entire system works, like as a complete unit, we do the E2E and integration test. That in integration tests, that's a completely different thing. But in unit test, we are only seeing how the controller works. So if you check the code base of the controller, you would see that here always what we are doing is we accept an email, all right, and then we call the user service using that email and just check if it's null or some things like that. So essentially controller is not doing any actual data processing by itself. It is calling the user service, doing a bit of data manipulation, and then returning the results. And this trend you would see in all the different controllers as well. And this trend you would see in all the different controllers as well. What they essentially do is they are calling the user services for the stuff that we are doing. All right. So if we check out the controllers.ts file, I'll not dive deep into how the entire system of mocking and spy functions work. I'll just give a brief overview, brief high-level overview of what all we are basically testing. So the first thing that we are testing is it should be defined, which means the controller should be defined, and that's just we are expecting the controller to not to be undefined. And then we are testing the individual functions in one test suite, right? So this dot get all users, you will see the function over here, dot get all users. So the tests for these are written in this particular suite. So let's open that. Okay, so there are two things that it must do. First is it should be defined, which means you cannot delete the function. Just in case if it's ever deleted, we'll get to know. And the second part is should always call user service dot find all, because to get all the list of users you need to call the service with that particular method, right? And this is the actual function body. You see what we are doing is we are just returning the result of user service dot find all, right? We are just calling the user service and returning the result. So here we have to just ensure that whatever you do in the controller, it must call the user service, because that's how we get the actual data. So first of all we get the user list, and then we expect the user list dot find all function to have been called. So this is what since we have implemented something using Chai sandbox, so this allows you to mock the function behavior like this. All right. Now similarly we have done it for different functions. As you can see, should call user service dot get email. Here we are ensuring that it, like when the controller wants to search something with the email, it must call the user service dot find one by email to have been called with that particular email, whatever email we are passing into the user controller. Now this allows us to completely monitor how the controller is working and whether or not if it is like importing data, if it's fetching data from the right source or not. So this and this, all these things we are testing in the unit tests. All right, now moving on. Alright, so similarly we have done something kind of really same for the services unit tests, and we'll condense it and then open it one by one. Alright, So again, each and every function has got its own test suite, like dot create, find all, find one by email, and all that. In the create function, there are different subpaths to it. The first being it should be defined, which means you need to have at least one function with that name, and then should create if all the details are given right. It should deny the creation if are not present. It should deny the creation if email already exists. Basically, we are ensuring that the service is able to cover all the edge cases that exist for it, right? So if you check it, we'll see that we're calling the new function. We say that it should not be undefined, and the ID should exist, and the first name should also match with what we've passed. And similarly, we are doing something very similar over here. We expect this to throw an error, so we have just wrapped it into a function, and we are expecting it to throw some error because the first name was sent as empty. Similarly, we are doing something over here where we are like calling a function if it already exists, and that must also throw an error. So this is allowing us to check if the services are working as they should be, because if a service already creates a duplicate account for a user that already exists, so that will really cause issues in the overall application of the overall functioning of the program. So with unit tests like these, we are able to check the corner cases on which the code works. And similarly, we have things like that implemented for all the methods that are described in this particular prototype. That's a typo over there, please ignore that one. Alright, so those were the unit tests, and moving on to, there are two more type of tests. First is a smoke test. All it does is it just ensures that the application is booting or not. So if the database for some reason fails, or if there's some TypeScript build error, then this test would fail, and we would know that it is not a bug in the business logic that we have written. It's a bug in the application framework itself. And the next and interesting part are the E2E tests. So I'll run the test and show you the output, so that you may have get a better insight to it. I'll only run the E2E test so that the output is less verbose. So it shows what functions currently running. We set the environment to test, and then we are calling Mocha with the TypeScript register, so that we can directly run the test written in TypeScript, and then exit if it gets stuck, and define the source of files. Alright, so here as you see that that's a very generic exception that Mongo throws. It's a well-known issue. We should find a fix for that soon. Alright, so here what we are doing is, here we are ensuring that the smoke test says this should listen for the get. Now that was the smoke test, and all these lines that you see there, the suite for the auth, for moderator, for users, and for visitors. Now each and every test in this is basically written to ensure that the rules are being followed. Like for instance, if we check the visitor suite, right, it says visitors should not be allowed to list all users. Visitors should not be allowed to view details of individual profiles. Visitors should not be allowed to delete any user, and visitors should not be allowed to create a new profile. Now internally what this test is doing is, it is trying to do all these things, and if it throws an error, right, when it's trying to list all the users and it throws an error, then that is the expected behavior that passes. Now similarly for users, it should be allowed to delete own profile. Now see, that's a change that we have on the visitors part, right? And it should not be allowed to delete any other user, should be allowed to view the details of own profile, should not be allowed to view the details of other profiles. All this behavior is defined here in the definitions file. Right here where we have defined the roles. As you can see, the visitor can only create own profile. That's the only right the visitor gets. And if we check the test behavior, the visitor, everything is not allowed, and the only thing that's allows it should be allowed to create a profile. Now I quickly open the test and show you how we have tried to test that automatically. Alright. Okay. So we are making a request to the application. Now that is the reason these are called end-to-end tests, because it tests the application as a whole in general, like from one end to the other. it does not matter what we are calling inside, what functions, what parameters we are passing to which particular layer. That is completely insignificant. It just tests it tests the entire working of the application. Now whenever we are trying to list all the users, the error should be true and the response code should be 403. That's forbidden. And similarly, should not be allowed to view details of individual users. It tries to view the detail of a particular email and the error turns out to be true, and we expect the error to be true. Now if this error turns out to be false, the test will fail. I'll just write error to be false and the test to fail. Now ideally this test must fail. Let's see. Alright, so here we have seen this should not be allowed to view the details of individual profile, because we said that the error should be false, but what happened was the expected was it should be false and the actual was it was true, and that is the reason the test failed. So if, just in case if there is any particular minor problem in the code base which tells us that which basically messes up the way we have set up the permissions, which messes up the way we have set up the roles, we can directly get the hint of it from these particular tests. And this thing can only be tested using the end-to-end test, because we are testing the entire application in general. Now if right now if I launch the entire test suite, what you will see is that all the individual tests will pass. Like right now we executed 22 tests, and out of which 21 passed the end-to-end tests, and all the rest passed because only one of the entity changed, right? And if we launch the entire test suite, what we see is this should be running. Alright, the first test suite failed itself. Alright, so this is how you know that you can automatically test the behavior of the application. So there can be two things. Either we have okay, so let us assume that what are the two cases in which any bug can arise in the project. The first part is we have written the test wrong and the application is right, and the second part is either the application is wrong and the test is right. So just right now the example that I showed you, in which the application was right, it was defined the way it was expected to work, and the test was wrong, where we say that expected to be, we switched this from true to false, and the application test broke, right? The second part can be the tests are right, I've just rectified the test, alright, and the application is wrong. It means that we have not defined the definitions to be the way they should be, alright. So just as a follow-up, as we can see that when we messed up one test, all the other tests passed, but only one would fail. So that is those are the important parts of an end-to-end testing strategy. We can see how the entire flow of the application is. So I'll just do one crafty thing. I will disallow the user to read his own profile. Alright, so let's just remove this line, save it once, and then run the end-to-end tests. So we have just revoked the access of the user from reading their own profile. So let us assume that this happened by one of the developers who was working on the project, and to ensure that everything is working right and we can rely on our tests, when the results of the tests come, they must fail. And here when we see the tests are failing, should we allow to view details of own profile, the tests of users are failing. So this clearly shows that even if we are messing some permissions over here, or if we are messing up the tests, we can, if both the things do not match, then definitely the errors would be thrown. Alright, so this is it from the testing part, and in the next video I'll be explaining how the caching layer works and how it can be used to optimize the overall performance. Thank you.